to go over a few safety features with you. This cord here, this electrical cord, is what makes your machine operate. So when you're setting up your machine, this cord gets plugged into the side of your sewing machine, and that is what gives your machine power. Okay, and your power cord has two lines coming from it. One that you plug into the wall, and then the other end of it is your pedal. So this is what you need to make your machine go, essentially. And this you would place on the floor in just a comfortable position for you to reach it with your feet. And so by pressing this pedal, you start sewing. And you just take your foot off when you stop. Press the pedal to go, and then just take your foot up when you are done sewing. Switch here is for your light. You turn your light to your sewing machine on and off with this switch. And to keep you safe, when you're sewing, when you need to, say if you break your needle and you need to change your sewing machine needle, or you have thread caught down in here that you need to kind of get out, turn your light off. Turn your light off, and then that makes your sewing machine inoperable so that you don't accidentally hit the pedal and start sewing and possibly get your finger stuck. So just turn your light off when you need to, try to find threads that are stuck in here, if you need to change your needle or anything in here. Okay, so we'll turn that back on. Okay, and when you're starting to sew, if this is absolutely your first time sewing, what I would suggest is just taking a scrap piece of fabric and drawing yourself some straight lines on it so that you can get, a little accustomed to your machine and sew a straight line. So this is what I do for the kids in my class who come to see me locally. So I just take a scrap piece of fabric and I draw lines on it. I also draw circles so that they can sew in a circle, but start out this way. So I'm going to show you on here just kind of your hand placement so that you don't get your finger caught in this needle. Lots of times kids are afraid that they're going to stick themselves when they're sewing. So the only way you're going to stick yourself is if you stick your finger underneath the needle. Your sewing machine needle is here, so you want your hands to either side of your presser foot at all times. So you never want to, as you're sewing, stick your finger in here or have your finger too close, or sewing in any kind of way where you could accidentally get your finger underneath this needle. And so to start off, I've drawn myself some straight lines, and I just want to, I'm going to put my fabric in here and line it up as much as I can with this line. And what you do is drop your presser foot and you turn your hand wheel that's over to the right. Turn that to manually turn your needle so that you get it into the place that you want it to be. So your hand wheel here, you turn this manually, and that controls your needle. So when you're turning your hand wheel, your needle moves up and down. So say you're sewing a stitch and you get to the end of your stitch and your needle is in the down position. Before you take your fabric out, you need to turn your hand wheel to raise your needle, and then you can lift your presser foot and take your fabric out. You never want to pull your fabric out with the needle still in the down position, because what happens is you'll end up breaking your needle. So just make sure when you're sewing a stitch, at the end of your stitch, if you end up with your needle down, just turn your hand wheel towards you, and that will raise your needle for you so that you can then lift your presser foot and take your fabric out. Okay, so let's sew that straight stitch here. And you can see with my left hand here, I just sort of have it here lightly to kind of lightly press it through, and then I'm holding up the end of my fabric here on the right hand side. Because the fabric will move through the sewing machine by itself. You just need to sort of guide it so that you're sewing in a straight line. And as I'm getting to the end, I'm removing my right hand and I'll just guide it with my left. You can also put your right hand on the other side if you need to guide it. Just make sure you're nowhere near this presser so that you don't poke yourself with the needle. Okay, I'm at the end, and you can see my needle is in the down position. So I'll raise my needle with my hand wheel, lift my presser foot, and then I can pull my fabric out. And on the side of my sewing machine, there is a blade, so I can use this to cut my thread. And like I said, this has a blade in it, so make sure you're not putting your fingers there. It's only for thread. So once you're sewing, just pull your thread over and slide it down to cut it. Now let's say you've made your seam, you've done a stitch and you realize it's a mistake. So your seam ripper is what you use to take your stitches out. And just like any sharp instrument, you want this pointed away from you. You never want to use your seam ripper with it going towards your fingers. Pointed in the opposite direction. So you can use this, you just pull up some of the threads here. Just go under a few of the threads. Sometimes this gets a little bit trickier if you have thread that's the same color as your fabric, but you're still able to do it. So if you just pull up some of your threads here, like I'm going about every inch or so, and then if you turn it over on the other side, and just pull up one of these threads, it pulls it out for you. So you can see that by pulling a little bit here, just skipping, doing maybe every inch or so. Once I turn it over and I pull it, the thread just comes out. Okay, and then you would just remove these loose threads here. Okay, this one isn't necessarily a safety feature, but I want to show you how to sew a circle. So same thing, you would drop your presser foot and just sort of line up your needle where you want it to be. And the way you do that, it would be if you're cutting out a circle. You continue to turn the paper so that you can cut it. You do the same thing here. You turn the fabric so that it continues to go around that circle. Right hand, and I have my left hand over on the side here, and then I'm just holding the bottom of it with 2 fingers of my right hand. And if you go a little bit slower, that helps you to guide it better. So I'm turning my fabric. Just continue to move your fabric around so that you stay on that line. And you go slower, because then you can guide it better. And you're back at your beginning. Lift your presser foot. My needle is down. So you want to make sure you raise it. You cannot pull your fabric out this way. Raise your needle. Pull your thread to your left. And you just cut it there. And that's your circular stitch.